A Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom, giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone for teaching us his truth, and salutations to the sincere Akim and Akwathim. And listen, may the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Rukwai, back in here with another quick on Lord's will, as always, an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, it's going to be a little bit of exhortation in regards to just the appreciation for having wisdom, and essentially also the benefits of when you don't have a woman, for brothers who might be single and so on and so forth. It's a refreshing thing to experience the comfort of wisdom, because sometimes as young men, yes, we get those moments where we're burning, but at the same time it's so comforting to actually have understanding in regards to who you are, and even to be also to be prevented from certain situations sometimes, because you might listen to a lot of these men and they go through particular things in regards to, it could be a woman, or it could be familial issues, or it could be whatever the case may be. In all these different situations, they could be prevented when they actually exercise and actually have wisdom. So it's just it's just an appreciation for the Lord to actually give us this understanding, right? And essentially, and hopefully, to be able to keep us in the day of wrath, as the scriptures say, to seek righteousness and seek meekness, if you may be hidden from the day of the Lord's wrath, right? To roughly paraphrase, right? And that's one of the principal things, as it says in the scriptures. The one of the principal things is wisdom. And with all that get understanding, right? That's one of the main things that our people tend to neglect, right? They don't see essentially the value in it. And you essentially have, and it's not like the Lord is not compassionate. The Lord has sent the prophets as a messenger to give them this this understanding, right? Because he truly has compassion on his people, to be hid in the Lord's wrath. But it's just that our people just don't care, as the scriptures say, to roughly paraphrase, wisdom crieth, and she uttereth her voice in the chief place of concourse. So it's not like, with all these different calamities that's occurring, it's not like the Lord doesn't have, his servants, the prophets, giving them the secrets, giving them the intel, giving them the inside scoop, the director's cut, in regards to, what's going on in the world, right? In regards to their identity and why they're going through these different, particular situations. Why? Like answering the question, like the big question is why, so, it's just a comforting thing. I just been, meditating on just in regards to, the comforting of dwelling with wisdom, right? And it's such a it's a comfort, it's a pillar of rest, especially after a long day and so forth, and you have to deal with people in the world, and you have to deal with parasites that essentially drain your energy, right? So I just wanted to read a little bit of this chapter here. As a matter of fact, let me get this in Wisdom of Solomon, the 6th chapter here. This is Wisdom of Solomon 6 and verse 13, and it says, she, in regards to speaking of wisdom here, and it says here, she preventeth them that desire her in making herself first known unto them, right? So that there's a benefit in regards to having wisdom. Yes, Solomon spoke about, yes, with much wisdom comes much grief, but also remembering the Lord, blesses us with, different benefits, and that benefit isn't always something, sometimes even physical. Like it could be, being prevented from certain situations, that, the Lord, took us away from, right? So those are some of the benefits of actually, dwelling with wisdom, is not to, to have a certain type of discretion, but also understanding that certain situations, you understand that because you dwell with wisdom, you understand you have a fear of the Lord, those things, you prevented from those kinds of, situations, right? So It's basically a lot of situations that a lot of our people they willy-nilly go into because they don't dwell and see the value and the importance of it, right? So I wanted to read this a little bit in Wisdom of Solomon, the 8th chapter. Um, and I'll just read down really and truly. It's quite a good chapter, I'm not gonna lie. And it says here, Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 8, verse 1, and it says, Wisdom reacheth from one end to another mightily, and sweetly doth she order all things. I'm sorry, excuse me. And it says here, I loved her and sought her from my youth, right? And that's one of the things that's very important too, that is mentioned in the book of Ecclesiastes is to remember our Creator in the days of thy youth, right? Where we actually have breath and understanding, right? While we actually have strength, mental strength, physical strength, because and then when you read later on in that verse, to roughly paraphrase, before the evil day draws nigh, to roughly paraphrase, right? Because all these different so-called, like, not even so-called, but all these different calamities and evils are essentially being what's it called being increasing, I should say, even more and more. Like when you look at the situation in Mexico, the scriptures talk about spirits created for vengeance, teeth of wild beasts, and so all these different evils, Lord's Yahweh Bashem Ratazah were prevented from all these different calamities and evils and so on and so forth, right? But it says here in verse 2, just to continue, it says, I've loved her and sought her from my youth. I desired to make her my spouse, and was a lover of her beauty, right? Because these things are open unto us in regards to our history and our forefathers, knowing knowing our identity, knowing the things that, knowing how knowledgeable a lot of our forefathers and even foremothers, were, the kind of character they exemplified, all these things are being known unto us, in these times, right? Are being made known unto us, right? And it says here, in that she is conversant with the Most High, she magnifieth her nobility. Yea, the Lord of all things himself loved her. She is privy to the mysteries of the knowledge of the Most High, Yahweh Bashem Shai, and a lover of his works, right? So the mysteries, all these different mysteries, the secrets, right? And the scriptures say that surely the Lord would give us essentially, not to roughly I'm thinking about two different scriptures. He would give us pastors according to his heart that shall feed us with wisdom and understanding. But the one I was actually also thinking about was Amos 3 verse 7, and where it says, well, surely the Lord would give us secrets unto his servants, the prophets, right? So we're learning the secrets, in regards to prophecies, in regards to, our identity, in regards to the laws, the insight, how to actually better ourselves, how to actually become more whole, right? Because we understand we're in a situation where we're sick. Yahweh Shai even said it himself. They that are whole don't need a physician, but they that are sick, right? Because we're coming out with all these different mental and physical infirmities, and through the Spirit of the Lord is basically acting as our physician to be able to bind us up and give us strength, right? Here it says, verse 5, Wisdom of Solomon 8 verse 5, and it says, if riches be a possession to be desired in this life, what is richer than wisdom that worketh in all things, right? And you see that, when you see that being manifested, like, with a lot of these different, other, like, I guess, Israelite camps too, they strongly magnify the actual physical possessions. And they don't see, what they're showing is, they show more of a value, an over importance in regards to the physical possessions rather than the actual riches, because the scriptures do talk about to set your affections and your on above and not upon the earth, to roughly paraphrase. And then that also I'll say this also, because, like, there's really nothing wrong with, having, some, nice things for yourself, right? But, it puts, when our people see a lot of those nice things, it puts them in a snare, and they don't prioritize the importance of it, right? Even though as riches increase, we don't set our affections upon it, right? Because we understand that this is the condition of the battle that we go, sometimes we're abased, sometimes we're abound, right? And Yahushua even said it himself, a man's life consisteth not in the things that he possesseth, right? This parable that he mentioned after the fact was a parable of a rich fool that prioritized, essentially, in regards to building all these different barns and, increasing the physical substance, but he didn't have, what was his mistake was that he didn't have a rich relationship with Yahweh Shai, right? He strongly prioritized the importance of actually having physical substance, right? So, and that's the conundrum a lot of our people want to face themselves, in the midst of Jacob's struggle, because they strongly prioritized focusing a lot on the earthly possessions rather than the actual spiritual possessions, right? Because spiritually they don't understand. What they try to do, I should say, is to fill a spiritual void with carnal things. That's our people's biggest problem, or one of our people's biggest problems. I'll continue on here. Let's see, where was I? This is Wisdom of Solomon 8 and 6, and it says, if prudence work, who of all that are is a more cunning workman than she? If a man love righteousness, love her, her labors are virtues, for she teacheth temperance, prudence, justice, fortitude, which are things as in can have nothing more profitable in their life. If a man desire much experience, she knoweth the things of old, and she conjectureth aright what is to come. She knoweth subtleties of speeches, and expound dark sentences. She foreseeth signs and wonders and events of seasons and times, right? So, it gives us the understanding, or the inside scoop of what's actually going on, within the parables, the prophecies, I meant to say, sorry, Salakia. Let me get that, hold on. In Sirach 39, I kind of just have my Apocrypha with me, so I just figured I would just, read this. This is Sirach 39, verse 1, and it says, but he that giveth his mind to the law of the Most High, and is occupied in the meditation thereof, will seek out the wisdom of all the ancient, to be occupied in prophecies, and he will keep the sayings of renowned men, and where subtle parables are, he will be there also, right? So it gives you an insight of what actually happened, right? And because we know the things of old, right? We know, the different captivities our people went into. We know, the prophets that were essentially rebuking our people and telling them to come back to the Lord, right? And that essentially that judgment, what happened upon our people when they didn't listen, right? So the Lord was truly compassionate by actually sending his servants, the prophets, by actually giving them this message of, okay, come back to the Lord before the judgment comes around, right? But a lot of our people didn't listen, right? They made fun of the prophets, like for example Jeremiah. They mocked him, they scoffed at him, but the word was essentially like a fire in his belly. So he he said, I wouldn't make no more mention of his name, but he went back out there and he just began to continue to speak, right? Because he had to, it was like a fire, it was like an itch that he had to scratch, right? So I'll go back here. Let's see here, verse Wisdom of Solomon 8 and 9, and it says, therefore I propose to take me to live with me, knowing that she would be a counselor of good things, and comfort in cares and grief. For her sake I will have estimation, among the multitude, and honor with the elders, though I be young. And that's very important too, because you get a lot of counsel, even being amongst like elders and godly men too. When you go into the story of King Rehoboam, that was one of the one of his biggest mistakes that he made. Is that he didn't value the counsel of the old men, that served amongst his father, but he went to the wisdom of the younger men, right? So, and the scriptures talk about that, like, to not to. Let me get it. Hold on. It's in a. One second. That's Sirach 8. I'm kind of just freestyling here. Let's see. Just bear with me on this. This is Sirach 8:8, and it says here, despise not the discourse of the wise, but acquaint thyself with their proverbs. For of them thou shalt learn instruction, and thou shalt learn to serve great men with ease. Miss not the discourse of the elders, for they learnt of their fathers, and of them thou shalt learn understanding, and give an answer as need requireth. Right. So that's an aspect of our culture. We strongly lack as a people, because Esau was very, systematic in terms of being destroying our families, but also destroying the old heads, like what we like to say. But when you look at the old heads, I should say, like, within amongst our people, whether the fathers, assuming that the fathers in the picture, or uncles, or older men, they're not reverenced as or seen as people that actually have kind of like wisdom all the time. They're mostly seen as they're just seen as grown children, because they don't conduct themselves as people that actually dwell with wisdom, right? They conduct themselves as people who actually they just what I'm saying, like they don't actually behave as people who are upstanding individuals. You look to them and you go to them for counsel and so on and so forth, right? And then within our laws, we have yes, we have particular laws to be able to reverence the hoary head, but at the same time, when you look at our culture, this so-called black culture, and so what I'm saying, like this Babylonian messed up culture that we've been seduced by, right? When you look at it, we don't have those upstanding kinds of individuals, and having those kinds of people to go and sought out wisdom in times of need. They're basically just seen as they're not seen as, I'm not saying to go disrespect your elders, that's not what I'm saying. When I say elders, I meant like people, old grown folks in the world. That's not what I'm saying, right? But they're not always seen in that positive light, that dwell with wisdom. That's really just what I'm saying, right? Sometimes they might drop some jewels here and there, right? And and you agree, right? You don't give them a hard time. They might say some things, right? They might give you what they have, because that's really might just all they have, right? When I say that, I mean like spiritual nuggets, of course, right? So let me go here. Wisdom of Solomon 8 verse 11, and it says, I shall be found of a quick conceit in judgment, and shall be admired in the sight of great men. And that's one of the things that that when I read that, it reminds me of certain forefathers, like a forefather Joseph, that were just honored amongst different people. Well, at that time it was the Pharaoh at that time that looked upon him, because he actually dwelt with wisdom and actually had understanding of the Pharaoh's dream, and to be able to give him insight of what it is, and an action plan on what to do, because that's what wisdom really does. It makes a man, as the scriptures say, wisdom maketh a man's face to shine, right? So just to show you the benefits of it. And this is just, I guess, a little bit of exhortation too, for brothers not to get too down on themselves, to not get too down on yourselves, not because you don't have a woman. It's just like this, what I'm saying, like, it's so much just like soak up when it comes to actually to dwell with wisdom, right? And Apostle Paul gave some really, really some good advice. When you read Corinthians, it's when you don't have a woman, it really gives you the opportunity to work more on yourself, and to actually develop certain things, and to actually become more profitable, right? So I just thought I would just read a little bit of this right there. I didn't really have much of a title. I didn't really have my Bible up with me. I just wanted to read a little bit of this, because it really shows the benefits of wisdom, right? And it shows the to the comforting thing, even for single brothers. If you don't have a woman, it is what it is, right? But because you're going to be comforted. That's really at the end of the day what it is, right? I think even Howard Shah even said that in John, I believe it's the 14th chapter, right? I shall send you a comforter, to roughly paraphrase, right? So that's pretty much it. I just wanted to read a little bit of that, but Lord's will, that was just a quick, edifying, lesson for you, exhortation to you. And I'd just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashim El Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.